Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Let's get started and look into our daily quiz. Let's look into the first question. Consider the following statements. MPs cannot be arrested during the session of Parliament and 40 days before the beginning and 40 days after the end of a session. This privilege is available in civil cases and in criminal cases. According to Constitution, courts can inquire into the proceedings of a house or its committees in exceptional circumstances. Which of the statements given above are correct? The answer to this is none. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article on the Hindu speaks about privileges of the MPs. Let us try and understand what are these options. When we look into the first option, it says MPs cannot be arrested during the session of Parliament and 40 days before the beginning and 40 days after the end of a session. This privilege is only available in civil cases and not in the criminal cases, which is why the first statement is wrong. Added to it, preventive detention cases also does not cover under this particular privilege. So it is only available in civil cases but not in criminal cases and preventive detention cases. When we look into the second statement, according to Constitution, courts can inquire into the proceedings of a house or its committees in exceptional circumstances. This is once again wrong. According to the Constitution, courts cannot inquire into the proceedings of a house or its committees. So whatever happens within the premises of the Parliament, the court cannot actually inquire anything that happens in the Parliament or within the committees. Since both the statements are wrong, the answer to this would be D, which is none. When we speak about privileges, this can be broadly categorized into two types of privileges. One is what is called as collective privileges. The other is also called as the individual privileges. What are these collective privileges? When we speak about collective privileges, these are the privileges which are given to MPs as a whole. All the MPs, they have these privileges. So the debates, proceedings can be published or denied to be published by the Indian Parliament. The Indian Parliament has a right to exclude strangers from its proceedings. The secret sittings of the House is also part of the parliamentary privilege. The Parliament can suspend or expel members in case of the breach of the privilege. The Parliament is entitled to punish outsiders or the members for any breach of privilege. The Parliament has a right to receive immediate information of the arrest, detention, conviction, imprisonment and release of a member. The proceedings of the House and committees of a Parliament can't be inquired by the court. These are some of the collective privileges of the Indian Parliament. Then we also have individual privileges. This includes no arrest of the member of the Parliament, but this is only for the civil cases and not for the criminal or the preventive detention cases. The members of the Parliament are also entitled to freedom of speech in the houses. They are not liable to any court proceedings for the given speech in the Parliament. However, it is regulated using the rules guiding such provisions of the House. Now let's look into the next practice question. With respect to private members bill introduced in the Parliament, which of the statements are correct? A member of the ruling dispensation who is not a minister is also considered as private member. Government bills and private members bills are governed by the same general procedure and pass through the same stages in the House. Its introduction in the House requires 7 days notice. Which of the statements are correct? The answer to this is 1 and 2 only. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article on the Hindu makes a mention to the private members bill. Let us try and understand what are these options. When we look into the first option, it says a member of the ruling dispensation who is not a minister is also considered as the private member. What do we understand by this? Let's say, for example, assume that I am the Home Minister. No, I'm not going to replace Amit Shah ji, but just as an example. So I, being the Home Minister, I would want to introduce some changes, let's say amendments to the UAPA. So what do? I introduce this bill as a Home Minister. If I am a minister wanting to bring some changes, wanting to bring in a new law, that is called as the government's bill or the public bill, where it is the minister who is issuing such a bill. However, let's assume that you are part of BJP, you are currently in the government, but you're not a minister. If you're not a minister, even when you want to introduce a bill in the parliament, you will be called as a private member. So any member who's not a minister, whether he is part of the government or he is not part of the government, whether he is part of the ruling dispensation belonging to a political party or the opposition party, such a person is called as a private member. If such a person introduces a bill in the parliament, that is what is called as the private members bill. Government bills and private members bills are governed by the same general procedure. Yes, this statement is also right, but its introduction in the house requires not 7 days notice, but instead what it requires is the 1 month's notice, which is why the third statement is wrong. What are the differences between the private members bill and public bill? What we have is the introduction in the either house of the parliament. It can be introduced in either house of the parliament. It will be introduced by any member of the parliament other than a minister. But when it comes to the public bill or the government bill, it is only by the minister. Chance of approval in parliament is lesser when it comes to the private members bill, and when it comes to the public bill, it has a greater chance. Rejection of the bill implies no effect on the government's position, expression of want of parliamentary confidence in the government, and may lead to its resignation. And notice period is about 1 month for the private members bill, and it is about 7 days for the public bill. And drafting of the bill, member who is introducing it will only draft it. Concerned department in consultation with the law department goes about drafting this legislation. So these are the differences between the private members bill and the public bill. And whenever there is a private bill that has to be introduced, this has to be accepted by the chairman in the case of Rajya Sabha and the speaker in case of the Lok Sabha. So a private member is simply any MP who is not a minister. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which of the following statements with respect to Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana are incorrect? PMFBY is optional for farmers who have not availed institutional credit, while the farmers who have borrowed institutional credit from banks are covered under the scheme mandatorily. Under the PMFBY, farmers have to pay a uniform maximum premium of 1.5% for crops that they cultivate in any season. Which of the statements are incorrect? Since it is asking for the incorrect statement, the answer to this is 2 only. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article on the PIB makes a reference to the Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. Let us try and understand what are these options. When we look into the first option, it says it is optional for the farmers who have not availed institutional credit. What is this institutional credit? Let's say there is a farmer who's taken money from the banking system. So he has taken a loan from the banking system. For all those people who have taken loan or availed loan from the banking channels or from any of the institutions established by law, for such people by default this insurance scheme gets covered. However, others can also join as well, but it is optional for the other farmers. So if there are farmers who have not taken loan, they have the option of entering this Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana by paying some premium, but it is not compulsory and mandatory for them. But for all others who have taken loan, it is compulsory and mandatory. So the first statement is right. When we look into the second statement, under PMFBY, farmers have to pay a uniform maximum premium of 1.5% for crops that they cultivate in any season. This is a wrong statement. Why? That is because it varies. When we speak about Kharif season, it is about 2% of the sum insured. When it is about Rabi season, it is about 1.5% of the sum insured. And when we speak about annual commercial or horticulture crop, it is about 5% of the sum insured. So basically, this Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana happens to be an insurance protection scheme for food crops, oil seeds, and annual horticultural commercial crops notified by the state government, and this is administered by the Ministry of Agriculture. Now let's look into the next practice question. Mission Raftaar, recently seen in news, is a drive against smuggling of narcotics through rail, a mission introduced by Indian Railways in order to mitigate the hardships of mothers traveling with their infants, an initiative of Ministry of Railways to achieve a target of doubling the average speed of freight trains and increasing the average speed of superfast mail and express trains by 25 km per hour, a setup for the purpose of business re-engineering and introducing a spirit of innovation in railways. So what is this mission Raftaar? This basically is an initiative of the Ministry of Railways to achieve a target of doubling the average speed freight trains and increasing the average speed of superfast mail and express trains by 25 km per hour. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article on the PIB makes a reference to the mission Raftaar. So remember, mission Raftaar is a mission envisaged for the speed enhancement, and whenever there has to be a speed enhancement, what it will require is multiple components coming into picture. Let's say for example, we have to introduce new technology, we may have to introduce high power locos, we may have to introduce modern coaches and better tracks. So it is not just about one component, but it is about all these components coming together to enhance the speed. And as part of it, what the railways has done, it is constructing more than 3000 km of dedicated freight corridor, which would enable freight trains to run at the speed of 100 kilometers per hour. So these are some of the initiatives taken by the government to improvise on the speed so that the railways reaches from the source to the destination on a faster basis. And as part of the assignment, you have to put on the comment section, what is this operation called? There is an operation to drive against the narcotics through the train. What is this operation all about? This basically meant that there are a number of people who are carrying the narcotics drugs making use of the railways. So we have the railway police force which immediately enters into this, and they have brought an end to this particular transfer of drugs from one place to another making use of the railways. What you have to do is put on the comment section what is this operation called as on the comment section. Then we have the mission introduced by Indian Railways in order to mitigate the hardships of mothers traveling with their infants. What is this mission? Please put it on the comment section. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following pairs. We have the king on one side, we have the dynasty they ruled on the other side. Nanuka, Chandela, Jayashakti, Paramara, Nagabhatta to Gurjara Pratihara, and Boja Rashtrakuta. How many pairs given above are correctly matched? The answer to this is B. Only two pairs are correctly matched. When we speak about King Nanuka, yes, he was the founder of Chandela dynasty. Hence, the first pair is correct. When we speak about Jayashakti, he belonged to the Chandela dynasty, and that is why the second option is wrong. When we speak about Nagabhatta too, yes, he was the part of Gurjara Pratihara dynasty. So the third statement is right. But when it comes to Boja, who was also called as Raja Boj Parmar, he was from the Parmara dynasty, and as a result, the fourth one is wrong, which is why only two pairs are right. And this happens to be a previous year question from the year 2022. Now let's look into the fact of the day. The fact of the day for today's discussion is the Energy Conservation Amendment Bill of 2022. The government has now introduced the Energy Conservation Amendment Bill in the Lok Sabha. The bill seeks to amend the Energy Conservation Act of 2001. So when we speak about Energy Conservation Act of 2001, it has some important features. One, it introduced the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. The Bureau of Energy Efficiency was established with effect from 1st March 2002 under the provisions of the Energy Conservation Act of 2001. It is responsible for the implementation of policies and programs related to energy. It also coordinates the implementation of energy conservation activities and has all these missions to institutionalize energy efficiency services, enable delivery mechanism, provide leadership to energy efficiency in all sectors of the economy, and its objective is to reduce energy intensity in the Indian economy. Followed by this, they also came up with the standards and the labeling in the Energy Conservation Act of 2001, which identify key activity for improvement in energy efficiency, which in place would ensure that only energy sufficient equipment and appliances would be made available to the consumers. Followed by this, we had the Central Energy Conservation Fund, and this fund was set up by the central government to develop delivery mechanism mechanism for large-scale adoption of energy efficiency services such as performance contracting and promotion of energy service companies. These are some of the important provisions under the Energy Conservation Act of 2001. The government now introduces the Energy Conservation Amendment Bill to introduce changes to the Energy Conservation Act of 2001. What are some of the important provisions under this bill? Basically, the obligation to use non-fossil sources of energy. There are multiple industries like the mining, steel, cement, textile, chemicals and petrochemicals, and these industries currently are using the fossil fuels. So what will be regulated is that these industries will be asked to cut down on their fossil usage. So obligation to use non-fossil sources of energy, basically to mitigate the impact of the fossil fuels. This act promotes energy efficiency and conservation. It provides for the regulation of energy consumption by equipment, appliances, buildings and industries, and this bill looks to propel India forward to help achieve its climate change targets. So basically, for India to achieve its climate change target, they have to reduce their use of the fossil fuels. In case a benchmark is set by the government and they are not able to meet this benchmark, they will also be levied with a penalty of up to 10 lakhs. It will also attract an additional penalty of up to twice the price of the oil equivalent of energy consumed above the prescribed norm. Then what we will have is the carbon trading, where the bill empowers the central government to specify a carbon credit trading scheme. Carbon credit implies a tradable permit to produce a specified amount of carbon emissions, and the central government or any other authorized agency may issue these carbon credit certificates to all these entities registered under and compliant with the scheme. In case there is an industry which emits a lot of carbon, then there is another industry which also emits a less amount of carbon. So they would be able to pick up the carbon credit and they would be able to trade it with this particular organization which has been able to emit large amount of carbon emissions. So they would be able to buy from this organization. So an entity would be able to buy and sell with respect to the carbon emissions. Then we have the Energy Conservation Code for the buildings. The act empowered the central government to specify energy conservation code for the buildings. The code prescribes energy consumption standards in terms of the area. The new code bill will now provide norms for energy efficiency and conservation, use of renewable sources of energy, and other requirements for the green buildings. These are some of the important provisions under this legislation. It is this that we have to understand with respect to the Energy Conservation Amendment Bill of 2022. This is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.